Former Senator Bongbong Marcos and Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte still lead the partial and unofficial count of election votes. Joining us now via Zoom is political analyst Herman Joseph Kraft from the University of the Philippines Political Science Department. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. What is your take on this partial unofficial count so far? Marcos at 30 million votes and Leni Robredo at over 14 million votes.
Well, it seems like the lead is insurmountable at this point in time, that we are probably looking at a Marcos administration as our next presidency in the next 6 years.
And let's get to the Senate race. No? We're seeing the likes of Robin Padilla topping the senatorial race, and you have some re-electionists like Mig Zubiri, Risa Ontiveros, Joel Villanueva. What kind of Senate are we going to have?
You know, that's an interesting question because the Senate has traditionally been the institution that provides a strong check to the presidency or to whoever the president is. Meaning to say that traditionally, this past several Congresses, the House of Representatives has always been seen as being an ally of the president, and the Senate has always been the institution that provides some sort of, I won't say of opposition, but an institutional check to whatever the president actually might want. Now, looking at the composition of the Senate right now, with the prospect of more with candidates who are actually seen as being aligned, more or less, or at least not in opposition to the BBM team. Seems like it means like we're looking at a Senate that might be a little bit friendlier nowadays. In the event that we should actually have a Marcos administration in the offing.
So, Professor, you're saying then that there will not be enough fiscalizers, not enough check and balances to a Marcos presidency with this Senate composition?
Let's just say that the prospect is that we'll have a Senate that's friendlier to a Marcos administration. Whether they're going to be less of a fiscalizer, I'm not really too sure about that. But at the same time, looking at the composition, the prospective composition of the Senate, it looks like he's going to have, there are more Marcos allies now in the Senate now than there ever was in past presidential administrations.
So, Professor, who do you think will be the next Senate president among these senators?
Well, we're looking at the some senators who are still in place now who might actually be there, but while I'm not yet, I'm sure it's not likely to be one of the new senators who's going to be the Senate president. Most likely, it's going to be one of the ones in their who are sitting as incumbents right now in the Senate. Although the prospect there, is unclear to me at this point in time.
And after this election, what do you think will be the role of Vice President Leni Robredo in the opposition, Professor?
That's a good question because looking at the way or the trends that our governments actually have had, right? Like I said, the Senate traditionally is the one that provides some sort of institutional check to the president. And if it is going to be a Senate that's going to be friendlier, then I think the opposition is going to be outside of, or the effective opposition to a Marcos administration would be outside of our government institutions. Which basically means that for Vice President Leni Robredo might in fact be the person around which an opposition might coalesce, might group itself. Right now, there are already talks and calls for the volunteer supporters of Vice President Leni Robredo in her run for the presidency, now to remain together and act as an effective opposition. No? So we might see a return to a strong parliament of the streets, no? With this kind of situation that we're facing. And that's probably one of the things that might come out of the fact that you did have a very intense support coming from those who were actually working for the for a Robredo presidency. But that not actually happening means that that there's a potential for this group to remain together, a social movement, if you will, okay, that will try to actually act as the fiscalizer, if you will, to a Marcos administration that seems to be surrounded by friendly forces at this point in time within the official government ranks.
So you talk about friendly forces in both the Senate and maybe even in the lower house supporting Bongbong Marcos. Do you think the issues of revising history, Marcos's unpaid taxes, will still be raised during his presidency?
That's an interesting question because one of the things that I think Montulfo was mentioning in that interview, right, was the idea that it's a good thing that you have the vice president and the president actually coming from the same team, because prospectively that will mean that the administration will get more things done. Now, with government. Basically across the legislature as well as the executive, the idea of having members of the Senate, the House, actually working in lockstep, if you will, with the Marcos administration, will probably mean that some of these issues that have bedeviled the Marcos family and Bongbong during the campaign will probably be set aside. But then again, I'll tell you this: he has more problems that he actually has to face. The kinds of policies that he has actually to take into consideration, really has to do with what are you going to do with reviving the economy. This is a serious issue that he has to face, and I think might be used as some sort of justification, for setting aside all of these issues that we've been talking about, regarding problems that that Bongbong Marcos actually has to respond to.
And of course, Professor, during this campaign, there's been a lot of talk of changing the constitution, changing the form of government, federalism, parliamentary form of government. Do you think the Senate will allow itself to change its form of government? There won't be a Senate anymore, and there'll just be one parliament. Everyone,
that's
all equal.
Institutionally speaking, right, in terms of the idea of an institutional interest, I don't think that there's going to be any desire on the part of the members of the Senate, to just go with a system which will mean that the Senate will have to be taken out of the process, right? So that's going to be a very difficult process to undertake in terms of the idea that if you're going to have a parliamentary system, the Senate actually goes. What happens is this something that the senators actually, I don't think that the senators are actually going to just take this lying down, so to speak.
We're taking a look right now at the front runners, in the senatorial race, like Chis Escudero, Alan Peter Cayetano, Joel Villanueva, J.V. Ejercito. These senators, when they were senators in the past, had their own independent minds.
That's right.
Do you think
Yes.
they will, and of course, still in the top 12 is the likes of Risa Ontiveros. So like will a Chis, JV, Joel oppose, policies that Bongbong Marcos would want to pass? Will they be rubber stamp senators? Or will they speak
Um,
their mind out and oppose? Eh,
That's
da-
right. I'm not too sure if we can actually talk about the idea that the rubber stamp, it will be a rubber stamp Senate. Like I said, it's a friendlier Senate
Okay.
compared to before, right?
Uh,
Meaning to say that there's going to be less of an opposition to some of the positions that a Marcos administration might actually take, less of a questioning, no, of how things are actually being done, compared perhaps to what we've had in the past. Having said that, I do remember that during the early years of the Duterte administration, the Senate was very much also an institution, no, that to a large extent went with many of the Duterte administration's policies, except that there was more of a questioning, no, of those policies, no, something that I am not sure that we might actually find right now.
and before we let you go, Professor Kraft, several months from now, how will we look back at this electoral exercise on May 9th in terms of the conduct of the polls? And we've also seen a lot of issues regarding faulty vote counting machines, malfunctioning SD cards, people waiting in line for hours to
Right.
vote.
Yeah. No, well, my suspicion is that a few months from now, we're actually going to be looking at the dynamics and intramurals, if you will, within the Bongbong within the Marcos administration. Because one of the things that we have to be looking at right now is who's going to be in the cabinet, for instance, and this is going to actually lead to a lot of negotiations. Now, remember, you do have two strong and who could have two strong candidates who could have both been presidential candidates in this particular election.
Okay,
right?
we only have a short period of time. Who do you think will be in his cabinet? I mean, the critical positions, the economic team, the finance secretary, NEDA, health secretary. You also have the DSWD secretary. Who do you think will be filling up those positions? And will there be a lot of infighting between Marcos and Duterte regarding who to appoint?
Okay, I can't talk to or speak to the idea of who might be in the cabinet, simply because there was really nothing that we could actually find, no, during. And this is the consequence of what happened when you don't have any policies clarified during the campaign. But having said that, no. I think the key issue was, is Sara Duterte going to get the defense portfolio, right? She did say that she was interested in that at the beginning, but one of the things that's actually interesting is that after that initial statement, we don't hear anything at all at this point in time. Yes, there's going to be a lot of negotiations going on between the Sara camp and the Bongbong camp as far as those cabinet portfolios are actually concerned, I think.
Thank you so much for your insights. Political analyst Herman Joseph Kraft from the University of the Philippines.